Hi, I'm Brenda Smith, and today, November 9th, 2007, I am here to do an interview with Rabbi Joseph H. Ehrenkranz. We are doing this project for the Stanford Jewish Historical Society to try to get some personal stories about what Stanford was really like in the early days. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Rabbi Joseph H. Ehrenkranz, Rabbi Emeritus of Stanford's Agudas Shalom. Rabbi, thank you so much for doing this interview. We really will treasure it, and I know you have wonderful stories to tell us.
I look forward to it.
That's great. I guess we should start with how you came to Stanford.
That's an interesting story. It was first week of December. I know it was after Thanksgiving, and I was in the study hall when I got a tap on the shoulder. The placement director at Yeshiva came out, and he said to me, "Come outside for a minute." And I came outside. He said, "I want you to go to fill in for someone. We had scheduled someone to go to Stanford this Shabbos. He can't make it, and we'd like you to go in his place." Those days, young people always consulted with their parents. I did nothing without my dad. So I called my dad. It was a Sunday, and I said, I told him the story that I have an opportunity to go to Stanford. The Yeshiva wants me to go there. My father said, "Absolutely not. Connecticut. Who knows how far that is?" Well, the truth to tell, I mean, I was not a kid, but I didn't really exactly know where Connecticut was. And it could be that it was far. But I went back to the office and I said to my father, "I can't go. Listen, I'm a 22-year-old kid." And I have to say, my father said I can't go.
What year was this?
This is 1948. This is 1948. So he said to me, "You can tell me what your father said, but I'm the placement director. And at the end of this year, you're going to get your smicha, you'll be ordained, and then you'll come for a job. And I will remind you, when I asked you to do something for us, you said, 'No, my father said it was too far.' And he said, it's not the way to go. You want favors from me." I said, "You got it. Let me just call my father." And I told my father exactly what he said. My father said, "Listen, you have no alternative. Go." I think my father thought Connecticut was someplace in Canada. It was far. It was very far.
Where were you born?
I was born in Newark, New Jersey. My folks came in 1923. I was born in 26. By that time, I had an older brother who was born in Poland. Mm-hmm. And what I remember that I think shaped my life is a story of what happened to me when I was in school. I went to public school, Chancellor Avenue Public School in Newark, and I always thought it was miles from the house. I walked both ways uphill in the rain. And Sandra and I went to Newark one day and we measured it just a little over a quarter of a mile. It seemed to me it was miles. But in any case, after a few sessions at school, someone from the congregation, well-meaning person I'm sure, came to my father and he said, "Do you know that your son says the Lord's Prayer every day?"
I did.
Well, that is true. We opened every day, folding our hands, and we saluted the flag, we sang Star Spangled Banner. No, we didn't. We sang My Country 'Tis of Thee, and then we said the Lord's Prayer. My father said, "Let me hear you say it." And I said the Lord's Prayer. And of course, it doesn't have Jesus' name in it. It's Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, so on and so forth. I said the whole prayer. He says, "I like that prayer. You can say it." And I think, in a sense, incidents like that guided me in my whole thinking. The prayer was a good prayer. It was Jesus' prayer. But there was nothing in it because Jesus was Jewish. There was nothing in it that was not a good prayer to say. So my father said, I have no objection to it. And I think that set my mind in a way, not cognitively, but I think underneath it all, that's the way I grew up. My father was very liberal, and he felt that the words were good. Don't worry about what other people are telling you, why you should or shouldn't say it. It makes sense. So I love that. I love that story. I remembered it very much.
I remember your father coming to Good Shalom and giving his sermons in Yiddish.
My father lived here for a year after he retired, and that's where I learned. I cut my speaking teeth, so to speak, at my father's shul. I was 4 years old, and when I remember this, on a given Yom Tov, I don't remember what it was, could have been Hanukkah, they put me up on a chair in front of the microphone, and they taught me a sermon, and they taught me how to use my fingers and my hands, and I delivered my first sermon when I was 4 years old. Later on, my mother sort of had, not Alzheimer's. In those days, they didn't have Alzheimer's, so they had dementia. Senility. So I remember my mother telling me that wasn't true. That I wasn't 4 years old. I actually walked out of her womb and delivered the sermon immediately in Yiddish. So I used to argue with her. I said, Ma, you know that couldn't happen. She says, you don't remember. At that time, she was a little sad.
All right, so when you came to Stanford to fill in...
Thought by you of Appleman. I just remind myself that was his name.
Okay, what happened after that? I mean, how did you come back as
I came?
You were 22 years old.
Well, let me tell you exactly what happened. I was in Rabbi Soloveitchik's class, and we were learning the tractate of Shabbat. That was the tractate we were learning. And one of the things we happened to have been learning that week, the lecture, was on the fact when you come to a congregation, and the congregation, the chazan makes kiddush on Friday night in the shul, you ought not to let him do that. Because that tradition happened when there were wayfarers, and the wayfarers always came to the synagogue and they had a meal for them in the shul. But now, everybody goes home and makes kiddush in their own home. Therefore, the blessing that he says is inappropriate. So we ought not to have that in our shuls. All right, I come here, 22 years old. This congregation is much older than I. On that Friday night, I don't remember exactly, but if they had 20 people, it was a lot. And there's Cantor Fischel Schulson then, I remember him, God rest his soul, and he made Kiddush Friday night. I have a dilemma. I just learned that passage, that what he's doing is wrong. But I say to myself, my first time in this synagogue, I'll probably never be here again. So let him do his thing and I'll mind my own business. It was okay. Well, on Sunday morning, they had a little meeting. I remember it was Joe Weinkrot, it was Harry Karp, a few other, I don't remember everybody, Lou Levinson, it was a whole crowd. And they asked me if I would come back next Friday night. Come back next weekend. Would I mind? They have nobody for next week. Would you come back next week? So I said, okay, I'll come back next week.
Where did you stay? At whose house? Do you remember?
Epstein, on Suburban Avenue, I think it was. On Suburban Avenue, Epstein had a little sort of a rooming house. Anyway, they had a room for me, and she had a restaurant.
A restaurant, yes. The only kosher restaurant.
Right. Well, across the street you had what's her name? Don Scher's grandmother.
Oh, I know.
I can't remember.
Krashansky.
Right. So, but in any case, I'll tell you a little story about the Epsteins. I came here, I weighed 147 pounds, and I didn't lose a single pound while I was at the Epsteins. Her food was absolutely sensational.
I remember eating this.
But at that time, one thought kishke was sensational, and cholent was sensational, and everything fattening was good. The schmaltz was sensational. Everything was sensational in those days. Now, of course, I don't touch any of that. But I enjoyed.
So you came back for the second weekend.
I came back for the second weekend, and I once again heard Cantor Schulzen make the kiddush. But again, I'm saying to myself, okay, twice, and that's all. At the end of that Sunday morning, they came to me and said, we want you to fill out December. Stay the whole month of December. So I've got 2 more weeks to go, and they're going to pay me $50 a weekend. Now, I want to tell you something. $50 in 1948 for a 22-year-old young man was a lot of money. I opened my eyes. $50, and I'm going to gain $50 four times because I have 4 weekends, and they said they'd pay me for the weekend that was. Wow, I came home with a big story to my dad. I was making $200 for a month. So I went back to my Rabbi Soloveitchik, and I told him that I had this dilemma. I come Friday night, it's a brand new synagogue to me. I've never been there. And the cantor gets up. Cantor is an elderly man. Elderly. He was probably 65. About in those days it was elderly. Today it's a young man. So I told this to Rabbi Soloveitchik, and I said, look, we studied together. I'm in your class, and this is what the law is. He said to me, the law can be a law, but a custom of a synagogue you never change. Don't you fool with the customs of that synagogue. Whatever they do, it's not terribly inappropriate. If they were just starting in synagogue, I would say you're right. Don't institute that custom. But if that's the way they have behaved over the years, then be very careful. Don't change that. It is inappropriate for them to do that. I was very happy to hear that because that saved me the inconvenience of getting up and saying you can't do that anymore. Wow, a little 22. I would say there was nobody under, certainly not under 50. There's nobody under 50. But for the most part, if you look at Rossman and Bernstein and Silverstein, most of those people who came on Friday night were in their 70s or 80s. Chowsky was approaching 90 already, and Bernstein was in his middle 80s. Rossman was probably just beginning his 80s. Silverstein was in his 80s. This was the crowd, and I was looked upon with great suspicion because, I heard what they were saying behind my back, and they weren't wrong. Too young to be a rabbi. But the challenge was good. My dad was a great teacher. My dad was probably the best sermonizer that I have ever heard in my life. And in Yiddish, but he moved a congregation. The only difference, small difference that my dad and I disagreed with, he used to say to me after I was here for a while, how long do you speak on Shabbos morning? I said 10, 12 minutes. And on Yom Tov I go 20 minutes. He said, paying you for nothing. My father, when he got up to speak, spoke for an hour. And Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, so it was an hour and 20 minutes. He got out of shul 3:30 on Rosh Hashanah, and there was no air conditioning. It was hot. The windows were not allowed to be open because my father would catch cold. That's the tradition you grow up in.
So after that time period, the December, what happened? How did you they called you back for full-time?
Well,
what was the scenario?
Here's what happened. At the end of 4 weeks, they had a meeting and said to me, we'd like you to come permanently. I said, but I'm not ordained. And they said, well, we'll continue coming just for weekends, and we'll pay you the $50 a weekend, and as soon as you get your ordination, you will have to come here on a full-time basis, and we'll pay you $100 a week. My father wasn't making $100 a week. So I listened with great interest, but I called my father, and my father said, don't take it. Don't take it, because once you go, you will stop studying. You'll be so involved, your studies will... And he says, I'm afraid you'll never be ordained. You'll never finish. Well, I took that really, I took that to heart. And I was afraid of that. I spent a lot of time, I spent a whole lifetime studying studies which I enjoyed. And I knew this would be an interference. There's no question. You need to prepare. And the first 4 weeks is nothing. You have a lot of material, but for every week on the Shabbos, you're going to have. And they want Friday night service and Saturday. Friday night, that was interesting to me. Shabbos morning, I had to speak in Yiddish. If I couldn't speak Yiddish, I couldn't get the job.
Really?
Friday night, you spoke in English. And since you had some people come on Friday who came on Saturday morning, you had to have 2 different sermons. So it's preparing 2 sermons for every Shabbos. I knew pretty well that would cut sharply into my studies. So I went back to the president of the university, Dr. Belkin, and I told him what happened. And Dr. Belkin said, no, our position on this is that while you're a student, you do not take a permanent job. So you tell them you can't have a job. Mm. I wasn't thrilled because for me that $100 a week sounded like they tell me today it's $100,000. You know, it was tremendous. So young and never really earned any. Yeah. So I came back and I told it was Joe Walker. I told the president that I can't take it because your university has decided that it is inappropriate for me to have a job while I'm finishing for my ordination. He said, okay. So he and the group, there were 3 of them, and I don't remember who, I think it was Lou Levinson was one of them. I don't remember who the other, it could be Harry, I don't remember who it was. They went to Dr. Belkin, and they said to him, we want this young man as our rabbi, and we understand you're opposed to it, and it's not a problem for us because we will go to the Jewish Theological Seminary and we'll get ourselves a conservative rabbi. Well, that was a kind of a threat you don't make to Yeshiva University at that time. Today it's different. Today that's not a threat. But in those days, there was a lot of defection. A lot of young men went to JTS. So he waited a day, and then he called me in, and he said, look, under the circumstances, maybe you should take it, but you got to promise to study. I never studied this with the same intensity ever again. Ever. For the rest of my life, I've never studied with the intensity that I had up until that time. Because once you get your mind into a different mode, it's preparing a service. You're thinking differently. You can't concentrate on the little words. And I'm not proud of this, but I can tell you I remember this very, very clearly. I was the first one in the class in for final exams. By the way, we had no written exams in all the years of our study. The way you were ordained is you went in at the end of your career as a student, and you had a 2-day conference with Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Schatzkis, and Dr. Belkin, the 3 of them. And those 2 days determine whether you're going to be ordained or not. Well, the first day, I was the first student in. And my friend Judd Feynman was the second student. We studied together. I was the first student in on a Tuesday morning, and it's just Dr. Belkin and Rabbi Schatzkis. And the exam is only on law, what we call Yoredea. And that fascinated me because that was practical rabbinics. There was no way you could be a rabbi unless you knew the law, especially laws that pertain to meat and dairy, laws that pertain to kosher meat, non-kosher meat, and all of the laws that you would need to know as a Jew, who want to keep kosher home. But as a rabbi, you have a greater responsibility. You will know what the questions will be. So that was a very intense study because that was practical rabbinics. That was not, it's like And I could tell you about that listening to, there's a course in practical rabbinics that was given by Rabbi Lookstein. And that was very intense. You listened very carefully because that was practical matters. Well, I came in that day, and the exam lasted, I don't remember exactly, but it was about 3 hours. And Rabbi Shatskas got up. He was the examiner. And he got up and he said, I want to shake your hand. He said, you are really prepared for the rabbit, and I'm very proud of you. It will be with great pride that I will add my signature to your ordination. Well, I felt like $1 million, so it was wonderful. And then that was Tuesday. Wednesday, I went in with Rabbi Soloveitchik. It was known that he did not tolerate those people who went to speak on weekends any place. That was not tolerable to him. And in fairness to him, he must have noticed, he's a very bright man, must have noticed the difference in my attention and my preparation for lectures before January 1 and after January 1. And it irked him. So the funny, it's just funny to me. You went into that exam, you had to prepare 2 tractates. You picked, you learned about 4 or 5 or 6 tractates in the period of the years leaning, coming towards the exam, and you picked out any 2, and they expected you to prepare those 2, and you didn't have to prepare anything else, so you reviewed those 2. So I submitted 2 tractates, and I knew I was in trouble when I walked in and Rabbi Soloveitchik said, well, let's put those 2 aside. And he took one that he had been learning, and he knew I was in his class, and I was totally unprepared for that and unhappy with and when you get a curveball thrown at you, it upsets you more and you don't think straight. So we had quite a session, and if not of Dr. Belkin, I would say I would have been in a lot of trouble. But Dr. Belkin loved me. I loved Dr. Belkin, and he was another father to me. So he rescued me, and he got me back on a tractate that he studied with, because he was my teacher when I came to Yeshiva University. So those 2 days were difficult days for me, and they don't tell you right away, so you got to wait another day. And Rabbi Soloveitchik takes off on Wednesday, he goes to Boston, because that's where he's a weekend. You don't get it. So it was not a happy time. However, look, I got the ordination. I was ordained. It was in May. I was 23 years old on May 3rd. I was ordained on May 10th, just 3 days after my 23rd birthday. And I came to Stanford. Of course, I had been here every week. There are two things. Of course, if someone was in the hospital, they let me know, and I would come in early on Friday to make a visit to the hospital. And if anybody died, they would call me. Do you remember Mosey, the old man Mosey? You couldn't remember? No. When I came, Mosey was 100 years old. He was 100 years old, a little man, and he died the first or second week I was here, but they never called me. And I couldn't understand it. And the answer that they gave me was, he couldn't afford to pay you anyway, he didn't have any money. That picture, talking a young man, 22 years old. I don't know whether it's true, but I think at a younger age you're more principled. There's no, things are not gray, they're black and white, there's right and wrong. At that age everything had to be right. So I really laced it into a few people because it wasn't right. They should have called me and I would have come up. And I only met him 4 or 5 times, but I said good Shabbos to him. Older man, 100. I never met anybody 100 years old. And that was unusual in those days for 100 years old. But
do you remember your first ceremony? Because Sherry Sherman said that Bill's grandfather,
Bill's grandfather was my first funeral.
what was his name? Sherman?
He was a Sherman. He was, you remember Mary Levine?
Yes, of course.
Levine. Mary Levine's brother was Bill Sherman's father. So this was Mary's father also.
Mm-hmm.
Mary's much warm, very warm. None of these people are here. Mary was warm, very verbal. Bill's father was, he was about Bill's size. He was about 6 foot tall, thin man, but very stern.
And a skier. A Jewish young man skiing,
yes.
At that time?
Skier, and he didn't ski here.
He went to Europe.
He always went to Switzerland to ski. So
that was your first funeral?
That was the first funeral that I ever officiated at this stand.
Do you remember the first wedding you did? Do you remember that? That's hard to remember. You've done so many weddings.
I used to keep a record, by the way, of all the weddings, all the funerals, all the bar mitzvahs, and all the circumcisions that I did. So when I passed 1,000 mark on all of them, I stopped. In any case, when I retired in 93, no longer kept records.
So you came to Stanford, and you were the young. I remember my father talking about you, the boy chick, the young boy.
Well, your father and mother,
the Goshbergs.
The Goshbergs were very warm people, and of course, they told me they had 2 daughters. That was it,
They didn't talk about their son?
No.
He was in the Navy when you came.
No.
Yeah, but anyway.
Well, that was the reason I found out later. But in any case, yes, they did tell me about it too. But they were warm. It's where I bought my clothes.
But my father, I think, was on the board when you first came.
That's
and he said they're mooching that young man. They gave you a hard time. And he was very upset because he had a son the same age and he felt for you.
The thing that, and I consulted with my dad because he had the experience and he had an uncanny understanding of human nature. My father said, I don't blame them. They're so much older than you and you're too young. And why would they want to like you? So you have to be there with a different mind. He says, if I were you, I would do something with youth. Get young people behind you. Get children. And do something with the children, and they'll come around. If their children will like you, they will like you too. And it was just simple wisdom that didn't take...
It was very good advice because Sherry Sherman also told me that you took a group of kids to the baseball game, and Bill Sherman was one of those kids. He was very young at the time, and he came home and he just loved you. And so that was your father gave you very good advice.
There were 2 things that I did that helped me here. One, I started a youth group, and kids were into baseball. I was into baseball. So we always were able to get tickets. In those days, tickets, you sat in the bleachers for 50 cents. And I never took any money from children or seniors. I'll tell you about that. If I had something I wanted to do, I learned, well, this was a little later, a couple of years later when Louis Lunston became involved in the synagogue, and he told me, don't charge anybody. It's silly. We'll get a few people. How much are you going to spend? So I took kids to a baseball game, $100. He said, I'll give you $100. Well, why? So this is the way it was. I used to take the kids in, see a baseball game, and I did something else that helped me greatly. I took the seniors, starting with Mrs. Gold and Mrs. Davidoff.
Who were sisters.
Yes, sisters. Older people who spoke Yiddish. They all spoke Yiddish, and they knew I spoke Yiddish. And I got tickets to a Yiddish theater. And again, I spoke to Louis, and he said, don't ever charge them. And how much were the tickets in those days? $20 a ticket. Take them to dinner. Got a bus. Used to take them and to a matinee on a Sunday. then we go out for dinner, and then come home by bus. But I would take 20, 30 seniors, and they never spoke disparagingly of me anymore because I was something that paid attention to them. I was concerned with how they felt. It wasn't I who selected what they should see, but I consulted with them. And there were several Yiddish shows in those days, and they picked a Yiddish show, and it was advertised, and I said, anybody who's a senior can come, and it's no charge. Most of these people could afford to pay anyway, but they don't. You know, I remember, I think I told this story to Posh last year, or I told it somewhere. One of these, what you had to do is, we went by bus, and came back by bus. You get on the bus, you had everybody's name, but mostly you counted as 28, right? So you count on the bus, 28 getting on the bus, 28 tickets distributed off the bus, after the show, 28 getting on, to the restaurant, 28 getting off, and you count 28, you go over the names. Well, we get out of the show, and get on the bus, we're going to the restaurant. I think we had to walk to the restaurant. It was only a few blocks. We get to the restaurant, I count off, it's 27. Wait a while, let me count again. 28 came from Stanford, and only 27 eating. What happened? Well, I had a chaperone. I don't remember who it was. There was another chaperone with me, and we decided we'd have to go look for this man. I don't know where to go. And we went back, retraced our steps, went to the theater, maybe he was in the bathroom. You know, you don't know what happened. These are not kids. Finally, it dawned on me as I'm coming back, there's a bar going down, a few steps down. There's a bar there. Let me take a look. I don't know. I've never been in a bar at that time. So I go down and I look, and sure enough, this guy's sitting in the bar and drinking. I went over and I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I was thirsty and I wanted a drink." I said, "But, there's a dinner we're all going." He said, I'll find it. Oh, that was so aggravating. I thought I lost one.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to come back to Stanford. But that was it.
So you're beginning, you have to tell people that it wasn't the Goodest Shalom that we know on Strawberry Hill. You were at Grove Street. What was it like? Explain it, because it's...
29 Grove Street. I want to tell you something. It's still one of the prettiest places ever. It was beautiful. The downstairs was awful. They had a little chapel downstairs that was uninviting.
And we had a mikveh there, didn't we?
Yeah, there's a mikveh in the back. They put my office there. Oh, we're not even going to get into it. You really want to know how bad that was.
And that kitchen where the sisterhood ladies used to make, remember we used to have a sisterhood luncheon where people used to come, businessmen used to come and eat there. Oh my God, the food was fantastic.
It was a cake sale,
and a
bake sale, and a luncheon. And it was packed.
Homemade balances and
everything was made by the women in that kitchen. Little old lady, what's her name? Her maiden name was Engel. Remember Rose Engel?
Oh, sure.
And Francis Bernstein, and Marsha Lieberman,
and Francis Brenner,
and Sue Cohn.
I wasn't saying
Sue Levine, Silverstein, of course. But these people worked for hours to put the meal on the table. They must have charged $5, and they must have made $500.
And the men closed their businesses and their offices, and they came and they ate.
It was a Goodest Shalom sisterhood luncheon. They came, and they bought cake and blintzes, whatever it was, to take home.
Absolutely.
And the sisterhood made a ton of money, and it went into the sisterhood.
From that little kitchen downstairs, it was really not a very nice place.
Unbelievable.
But
one more thing I've got to tell you. I remember the name was, I think, Lou Jacobs. Ira Jacobs, and not George Cohn. Lenny Cohn's father. I can't remember his name. Joe Cohn.
Joking.
Joe Cohn's father was Melech Cohn.
Right.
Melech Cohn had no tolerance for me. Melech Cohn was a man on an edge. He had no tolerance for me. Joe and Ira, I started this youth group, and I formed a basketball team out of that youth group. You know who?
I remember that basketball.
Yeah.
At the
Eddie Backer. Eddie Backer.
At the JCC.
And Lapin.
Seymour Lapin.
Seymour Lapin. And one of the major families in town who used to go to Bethel, but the kid played with us. In any case, the requirement was if you wanted to play basketball on my team, you had to come Sunday morning. So as they came Sunday morning to put on tefillin and to daven, and the girls came, and Ira Jacobs and Joe Cohn did all the shopping, the preparation of the breakfast, and the cleanup.
Oh, wow.
All on their own money and their own time, and it was not my headache, and they served lox and eggs and onions done to order. If somebody wanted it loose, somebody wanted it raw.
This is in the 50s, right?
This is in the 50s, sure, early 50s.
Right. What was the relationship of the JCC to Agudath? Because the Hebrew school...
Hebrew school was at JCC, but it was called a community Hebrew school, Center Progressive Hebrew School is what it was called. You remember that? Mr. Schiffman, you remember that? Yeah. And it would belong to the center, but the shul had no Hebrew school. They had no children when I came, so they had no Hebrew school. And all the kids went there.
Why wasn't it at the shul? There was just no room.
There was a room, sure.
But they had the yard. Why didn't they build the building? They weren't into building a building.
No, they had no money. This was not a money place that had no people. They had about 150 families.
When you came, 150
yeah.
families?
And these are older people, remember. And they're not giving people. They're not people. Remember, Lou Lutzstein didn't get involved until 1952. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you a story. Lou Lutzstein became president, and he called me in. Of course, I had not met him. He said, I'm becoming the president, and he said, young man, I'm telling you what I hear. I hear you are lazy. You basically are an absentee rabbi. We don't even know what you're doing with your time. And your kind of behavior, I will not tolerate. So I just tell you now that it will take, I'll give you a year, but at the end of the year, you are parting company with a good shown if this continues. I said, I don't know you, I haven't met you, and you really don't know me. He said, but I heard a lot about you. Well, I said, I'm not going to defend myself, and I don't know where you heard about me, but you're giving me a year? Let's wait. This was like April, May, 52, before the holidays. To his credit, it was in August. He called me in and he said, I was all wrong. I think you're a very special rabbi.
Wow.
And I think you have a lot of good ideas. You're innovative. And I think you're good for the shul. So let me tell you something to make up for what I said to you some months ago. I want you to try anything you want to do. Try it. If it's successful, it will be your credit. If it fails, you can blame it on me, because I think you're going to do very well. He was, the limit on presidency at that time was 5 years. He served 5 years as president. There's one other thing he did. Every Friday, Louis basically worked Monday, Tuesday, and a little bit on Wednesday. Thursday is very slow. Friday they closed. Had nothing to do. But Friday he used to go with me Pacific Street and Atlantic Street. We were all merchants in those days.
Right.
And Pacific Street was a Jewish street, all the merchants you had Frankel's department store, and then you had
Augustus and Sarner's department
Sarner,
store, and Truck and Umbrella.
Yeah, everything on those two
Johnny's.
streets. Everything on those streets. He was around the corner. Yeah, everything on those two streets. And what he did is take me in to visit with each one. Some who knew me because they would come to shul on occasion or had been on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, and some who had never met me. And he introduced me as his rabbi with a lot of pride and showed me how to raise funds. You cannot be shy about raising funds. So when he would tell them what he thought they ought to give, there was always a liar, but there was a knack to it. There was a knack to it. And I picked up that knack pretty
Yes,
fast.
you did.
And we formed a good team. We were a good team. I never forgot what he did, coming back to me to tell me that he was mistaken. He was listening to people he shouldn't have. But and you know what? I'm not so sure in my mind that when someone makes an accusation like that, they don't, light a fire on me. I don't know.
Then he was president again, much later.
Not much later. He had 5 years, and by constitution he couldn't take it any longer. Louis Kuriansky took over, and then he took another 5 years after this. So Louis Lotstein, in the 12-year period, was my president for 10 years.
Wow.
And I learned much from him, and he was good. First of all, he came davening all the time, never missed a Shabbos. My famous story. It's the first week we're in the shul. It's 1965. No, it's the first winter week in the shul.
In the new shul.
In the new shul, 1965. We opened up mid-August, and winter came around November, December, got cold, and of course, nothing worked. Lights didn't work, but no heat. There's no heat in the shul. Mrs. Lotstein, his mother, is sitting in the front row of the women, and Louis Lotstein, who, by the way, never came late. Never came late. He came davening on Shabbos morning. He was there 5 to 9, 10 to 9. Never came late. But he was there every Shabbos. He was present, and didn't come to sit on a bema. He sat where I would like to sit.
I remember that.
And he sat in the front row, first seat. His mother, 4 rows up behind the pizza, and she's got her coat on, fur coat. And there are very few people. It's now about 9:15, and it's cold in shul. There are maybe 15, 20 people in shul. And she yells out, "Rabbi, it's cold in here. Why you don't put on the heat?"
I can just hear her.
So I said, "Louis is in the front row, and he's the president. Ask him." Oh, she says, "I wouldn't bother Louis." It was so funny. She was laughing, but she said, "I wouldn't bother Louis." No, he was the president of the synagogue. The rabbi, it was...
It would be very interesting to find out how we moved from, Forest to... Not Forest,
It was
Grove Street.
What happened from 1949 when I came to 1957 was a process of growth. You brought in some people every year. I was never home a single night. Any night that was free, I would always call for a little meeting with 4 or 5 new families, bring them to your home, let me address them, and I had a little charisma too. I was a little younger, and they all had daughters. I used to go after membership, and that was what happened. Our membership grew. Well, I think the biggest acquisition ever, in my mind, the best thing I did for a good Shalom was to bring in Sal Young. That is 1956, 57. Sal left Temple Bethel, and along with Sal I would estimate in the first year another half dozen people left Temple Bethel. And you know, after I came here, it was not unusual. Rabbis delivered a sermon after the Torah was read. Mm-hmm. I never did that. I always delivered a sermon just before you go home. First of all, that's when all the people are there already. The Torah reading, now all the people are there. So if I'm going to deliver a sermon, I might not have people. Bethel services finished much earlier than ours, and I would have 10, 12 people come from Bethel to hear the sermon here. You know, my competition there at that point was not, I don't want to mention names, but it was not the greatest. The 1957, the shul began to grow more rapidly, and the seats were filling up, and I was still delivering sermons in Yiddish on Shabbos morning. Still delivered 57, 56, 57, still in Yiddish. As a matter of fact, I delivered sermons in Yiddish until 1961. Okay? 1961 we began planning, and that's when it stopped because the crowd was no longer an exclusively Yiddish crowd. Yeah. Well, you see, but I can take the youngs, they understand Yiddish. You know, that crowd that came, the crowd who was then already my age, a couple of years older, not that much difference between us, but they understood Yiddish. It's the younger crowd who it didn't mean anything. So 1957, 58, we began talking about you just can't get the people in here. It's just there's no room. And began to look for property. 1955, there were several changes. 1955, Shalom Cohen came. And that was a big plus for a good Shalom. Everybody loved Fischel Schulzen. Everybody loved him. He was a kind, a good, a smart man, and he was musically very capable. You know, if it was a C, it was going to be a C, a high C, whatever it is. I mean, it had to be exact. And he had a good choir. Joe Gold still remembers he was in that choir.
Oh, wow.
And so he talks about it. And a lot of people had I have never heard a disparaging word about Fischel Schulzen. And I was very friendly with him, although the age gap, you got to remember, I was at 22 and I came at 23, and he was already 65. That's a lot of years between people. But we were very fond of each other, I think. I was fond of him. But he passed on. And, or maybe he hadn't passed on, boy. He just
retired.
Yeah, could be. I don't recall. Yeah. We could check that easily. But then Shalom Cohen came. Shalom had voice. He had personality that was wonderful.
Yes.
And he had the kind of a voice. He didn't have control of his voice like Fischel Schulzen did. He was not a musician, but he had heart. He had warmth, he had heart, he had personality, and he had clout. It was a great, great combination.
Oh, yeah.
Who also had wonderful, wonderful personality in the jewelry store. In any case, they were a great combination. And that year was the year we had been through so many principles of the Center Progressive Hebrew School. It was horrendous. Wolfish, Lustig, I mean, I could think of half the Green, I mean, half a dozen guys who came. Nobody made it. I knew Walter from Yeshiva University.
Walter
Shabbatovitz.
Ah.
So I brought him here, 1955.
To be the principal of
the Center Progressive Hebrew School.
Uh-huh.
And he was. And the following year, we started a day school. We together went door to door, finding out who has children that age, whether they were a member of the shul or not, and we brought together a group of 10 children.
And the youngest child was one of those early?
Young, yes.
Yeah, well, Saul Young.
Saul Young's son was in first class, and that was a big tribute to us, that she would trust someone she was that is not a frum crowd, she's not that.
Yeah.
So David was a student, and Walter's son, Avi was a student, and there were 8 others, whatever it is. Walter always was, is, and always will be an educator. And so he was meticulous, caring about the Jewish education and the secular education. And he produced that first year students where the parents were very proud of what the children knew.
That is.
And
So going back to how we moved from Grove Street to...
1957 is when they started looking for property. To begin with, Walter and I went together. Big real estate people. Send the Kiriansky, send the Guano, send others. But we took it upon ourselves, and we located 3 or 4 different pieces of property. And all of them that we located would have been a disaster for the children had they listened to us. But fortunately, we were still young, and they looked at us that way. And ultimately, Louis Kiriansky and Louis Rothstein and the people who had been living here for years and years and knew the city and knew they were now. And it just so happened that boys, what's the name of the school? It was a boys' school that we're at now.
Oh,
No, Louis was a girls' school.
Yeah, and that was on Portland Avenue.
Yeah.
What was the name? King School.
King School. King School is on that corner. And they used to play football on where we have the shul now, and the school is down where the school is today. It's the same school. And they had to expand. They were growing, they had to expand, and this place was not big enough, not good enough, and they wanted out. And some agreement, I believe it was Louis Kiriansky who made the agreement with them, and we got a customer for our shul. We bought the property, I think it was $350,000, and we sold, and that included the school building.
Oh, wow.
And we sold the synagogue for $225,000. Incidentally, it wasn't long after that they turned down $1 million. The church that bought it, they turned down $1 million. The city offered them $1 million. They wanted to
High-rise.
the street. No, run the street through there.
Oh.
Create a major, coming down Broad, not Broad. What street are you coming down there?
Main Street.
No, not Main. No, the next street where the library is. No, that's Broad. Between the library and what street? There was Burdick Junior High on that street.
Bedford? No.
Burdick is on that street.
Forest
Street. Wow. The city wanted to make Forest Street a main throughway, offered them $1 million, and they turned it down, and they were right, because you see what they... Have you ever been there again?
Oh, they built another building.
They built another building, they bought additional lots, and they keep that synagogue in grade A condition. They still have the same benches we had, same fixtures.
Same stained glass.
Same stained glass with the Jewish insignias.
Well, the thing about the old synagogue is that people don't realize when we got married in '61, I wanted to walk down the center aisle, and they had 2 small side aisles.
No center aisle.
No center aisle. So when did we actually move into Strawberry Hill?
1965, we moved into Strawberry Hill. 63, we sold the building, bought this property and sold the building in 63, moved into the Jewish Center from 63 to 65, and in August we inaugurated this building, and the guest speaker was Senator Dodd. This Senator Dodd's father.
Oh, really?
Tom Dodd. He was the guest speaker.
Wow.
That was a great occasion, too. And we marched with the Sifrei Torah from the Jewish Center. All our tours were at the Jewish Center. We marched with the band of music up from the Jewish Center to the new shul. with children and seniors. Seniors all rode in cars, right? We had cars for them to ride in, open cars with a Torah and canopy. I saw pictures recently showing Cohen with a Torah and a canopy over his head. It was a great.
It was a real experience. Fabulous
wonderful experience. And
how old is the shul now? How many?
65. From 90, how was the building?
Yeah.
That's 42 years.
Okay.
That's all. That's
but a good shalom from
1889 was the first meeting at Congregation of the Shalom, and they do have some papers. And the thing is, in 2009, the synagogue will be 120 years old. In 2008, Joe Ehrenkranz will have been there 60 years.
Wow.
Half the life of the good Joe.
Wow, that's amazing. And when you came, there were 150 families. And then when you retired, it was the largest...
841 families from 1993 when I retired. It was the largest Orthodox synagogue in New England. It probably is still, with 200 families less, is still probably one of the largest, if not the largest in all of New England, because large synagogue. But Stamford was the only community in all of the United States where the Orthodox synagogue was larger than the conservative or reform. And from 1969 to 73, we were larger than Bethel and Sinai put together. So that was...
Thanks to you.
I had something to do with it.
Oh, you had a lot to do with it.
We had a concentration of some of the nicest people in the whole world, not just Stanford. It was people with a lot of heart and a lot of giving of themselves. You know, I'll never stop talking about Louis Rothstein, because his dedication to a good shalom is legion. There's very few people who can do that. He was off every Friday. Didn't work on Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, basically, was a good shalom.
But you know, when you think about all the presidents of a good shalom, were the best and the brightest, all the way through. Shuriansky, wasn't Saul Porton at one time? No, he was Bethel. I know my brother, Larry Gashford, was president. Wasn't he president during the move or right after the move?
Right, I think in 65 he was...
We had some big 75-year celebration.
Yeah. 64 will be 75 years. He was the president at the time.
But the president...
Also innovative, also encouraging. See, you need a president who's not going to contend with you. And you need what we don't have in the United States today anymore. In those days, the rabbi was the spiritual leader and the CEO.
Absolutely.
He ran the place.
Absolutely.
And his decision was final. Lou Kuriansky, to his great credit, was an accountant, and he held me back about managing money. Why? Because we were collecting money for the new building, and we'd get 100 shares of IBM. So I would tell the bookkeeper, just put the 100 shares away, you don't sell them because IBM is going to grow. Well, the bookkeeper would report this to Louis Kuriansky. He called me in, and he said, we're not in the business of brokerage. We're not in the business of guessing what's going to grow. You need money. You have to, the day you have to sell all the stock, despite what you think. That's fiscal responsibility. And that is a blessing to a rabbi if you have somebody who tells you fiscal responsibility and what to do. And that's why, for me, I never could get into trouble. Number one, because rabbis never sign checks. And you can't make decisions. That's really important to know.
Yeah.
That you don't make decisions. So, not you can't get into trouble. And that was a good
She
thing.
always had hardworking, good presidents and people on the boards and in the sisterhood who cared, who really...
I can't tell you enough about however great our presidents and boards were, nobody worked as hard as the people of Sisterhood. Sadie Silverstein, this was not just a woman, this was
A force of nature!
God, but a hard worker.
Oh, yeah.
The women get in. I remember Rose Engel and Bernstein. Their feet were swollen. They were standing in the store, right? They
Right.
Still, but they took off. It didn't make any difference. You just made sure that the
gift shop.
No, those before gift shop. They didn't have a gift shop early on. You had to make sure that the bake sale didn't come in December, because these people worked in the stores in December. Right? And they worked around the clock. These people were hard-working people.
Yeah.
Produced, so happy to produce. Friday night, they were the host. Nobody ever hosted a Friday night except the Sisterhood.
Really?
Yeah, only Sisterhood. And
They helped furnish the new building. They put...
oh, the cup. You know, they came up with the first $25,000 gift. The first gift for the building fund was $25,000. Okay? A Sisterhood. I didn't even know, didn't have a dream that they would have 20. You're going back a long time ago.
I remember Mrs. Rose Gold at Sisterhood with the, she used to take the dues and she said, and Mrs. So-and-so gave $5 this week because of her grandson's bar mitzvah. It was such a wonderful bar mitzvah. You should have been there. And she goes out of oh, it was so fantastic.
Well, when she read the minutes, I was the one sister meetings too. She read the minutes, she would say, we got $10 from this and this family, and I want to tell you, from this and this family, $10 was really a good donation. They can't afford so much. Then she'd say, I got $25 from this family. $25 is not so much from this family, they can afford it. And that's the way she would read. People would come to sisterhood meetings just to hear her read the minutes, because she was interesting, but interested in the shul.
Worked.
That shul was hers. And you know, her husband never came to shul. You know that. Yeah, Mr. Gold never came to shul.
Well, you know, Rabbi, we could go on for another 3 hours here. We haven't even touched on your career of tour leader and how all the trips you've taken and your career at Sacred Heart. I mean, there's so much more, and I know you have another appointment. So why don't we end this and promise us that we can meet with you again to go on and on and on. Your stories are fantastic.
You think you enjoyed it. I would like to know that I enjoyed it. I like thinking back. It's nostalgia is great, and I have only good things to think about.
That's right. And your kids, all 100 of them, and your grandkids should have copies of these because it's fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.